My name is Esther Collins, and I'm 81 years old. I've lived a quiet life in a quiet town, tucked between hills and railroad tracks in rural Indiana. Most folks know me as the lady with the big flower garden and the calm voice who bakes pies for church socials. But there's something about being old. People think you've forgotten. They think age erases memory. But some memories carve themselves so deep into your bones, no wrinkle or prayer can hide them. Like the one I'm about to tell you. It was the first time I'd been back to my childhood home in 62 years. The paint had peeled off the porch railings. The wind chimes my mother once loved were rusted and silent. And in the very room where I used to play with my dolls, I stood holding a photo in my trembling hand. Me, aged 9, sitting on the front step beside my older brother Jack. He was smiling. I wasn't. Because behind that photo was a truth no one wanted to hear. The kind of truth that lives in shadows. When I walked through that house for the last time, I found something tucked inside a book in my mother's dresser drawer. Letter. In Jack's handwriting. What it said made my knees buckle. What it meant changed everything I thought I knew. And that's where it truly began. Not back then, but right there, with the secret my mother had buried, and the moment I finally unearthed it. Because that letter proved I wasn't crazy. It proved I wasn't lying. But let me take you back to the day I was told to forget. It was 1952. I was 10 years old, and something awful had just happened upstairs in my brother's room. I remember the way the floorboards creaked when I ran down, sobbing. My mother was in the kitchen, humming to the radio, her hands deep in dishwater. I clutched her apron, screaming, shaking. She turned off the water. She wiped her hands. And then she did something I've never forgotten. She knelt, looked me dead in the eyes and whispered, "That didn't happen. Do you understand me, Esther? Nothing happened. You will never speak of this again." And just like that, my childhood cracked. But back then, I didn't have words for what Jack did. I didn't understand it. I just knew something terrible had been done to me, and the one person I ran to, my mother, turned her back. Why? That's the question that haunted me for decades. The day it happened, I couldn't sit down properly. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop crying. But no one came to check on me. No one asked me why I wouldn't go upstairs anymore. Jack just smirked like nothing happened. And my mother. She packed my school lunch and acted like we were the perfect little family. Every time I opened my mouth to say something, to the pastor, to the school nurse, even to my grandmother, my mother would give me a look that froze the words in my throat. The look that said, "Try me." So I became quiet, polite, obedient. On the outside, I was just another girl in Sunday school with shiny shoes and straight braids. But inside, something inside me had curled into itself and died. Still, I tried to be normal. I played jacks with the neighbor kids, cleaned my room. I sang in the church choir. I smiled when Jack smiled. But every time he walked past me, I flinched. Every time his bedroom door creaked, I froze. He never touched me again after that day. He didn't have to. The silence did the rest. Years passed. Jack grew older, taller, cockier. My mother praised him for every little thing. His math grades, his table manners, the way he held doors open for her. "My sweet boy," she'd say. I started having nightmares. Wetting the bed. Crying in my sleep. And when my mother caught me one morning, shaking in my nightgown, she slapped me across the face and said, "Stop seeking attention." I was 11. I stopped speaking much after that. School became my only escape. I stayed late in the library. I pretended the stories I read were mine. That I was brave. That I was seen. Then one day, during recess, I told a teacher I had stomach pains and didn't want to go home. She looked at me, concerned. She asked if something had happened. For a moment I almost said it. Almost told her what Jack had done. But then my mother showed up at the school gate, all polite smiles and tight lips. She took me home and locked me in my room for 2 days. No dinner. No voice. "You don't get to shame this family," she said through the door. That was when I learned the rules. Rule 1, smile. Rule 2, lie. Rule 3, forget. But I never forgot. When I turned 18, I left. I got on a train to Chicago and never looked back. I worked as a cleaner, a seamstress, and eventually I became a nurse. I got married, had children. I told myself I had outrun the past. But trauma has long legs. And silence has sharp teeth. I never told my husband about Jack. Not fully. I hinted once or twice. Mentioned my brother made me uncomfortable. But when he pressed for details, I smiled and said, "It was a long time ago." Delight. Like my mother taught me. But now, all these years later, in that dusty house with that letter in my hand, something inside me finally screamed. Because the letter, Jack's letter, was dated 3 months before he died. And it started with one line. "Esther, I'm sorry." Sorry. Why now? And why was the letter never sent? The paper smelled like old ink and forgotten truth. My hands trembled as I kept reading. But just as I got to the second paragraph, the front door creaked behind me. I wasn't alone in the house. And that's when everything shifted. If Esther's story touched you or left you speechless, don't go anywhere. Her journey is just beginning. What was in that letter? Who walked in behind her? And how did this quiet grandmother finally reclaim her voice after decades of silence? Comment your thoughts below, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. The truth is coming, and it won't be quiet. I turned around slowly, clutching the letter so tight the edges bent beneath my fingers. My breath caught in my chest. "Who's there?" I asked, trying to sound firm, but my voice cracked. For a moment there was only silence. Then a familiar voice answered. "It's just me, Aunt Esther. It's David. David, Jack's son. My nephew. The boy who once bounced on my knee while I read bedtime stories. The man I hadn't seen in almost 20 years." He stepped into the room, taller than I remembered, but his eyes, Jack's eyes, still held that same unnerving intensity. I hadn't told anyone I was coming to the house. The estate was long settled. Why was he here? "I figured you might come," he said, eyeing the letter in my hand. I instinctively slipped it into my sweater pocket. "You knew?" "Yes." He shrugged, stepping closer. "I've known something was off for years. Dad used to mutter your name in his sleep. Always the same phrase. 'I'm sorry, Esther. I didn't mean to.' Over and over again. He died with that guilt rotting inside him. But no one ever said what happened." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. The walls of that house felt like they were pressing in again, the same way they did when I was a little girl hiding from the truth. David sat on the edge of my mother's old rocking chair, the one she used to scold me from when I came home crying after school. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said gently. "But I always wondered why you left and never came back." I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Then, for the first time in 70 years, I said it out loud. "Your father hurt me." David's face twisted. "Hurt you how?" I looked away. The words choked in my throat. "Badly," I whispered. The room went still. His hands clenched around the arms of the chair. "He never told me," David said, voice hoarse. "Of course not," I snapped. "Men like him never do." A heavy silence filled the room. And then he said something I didn't expect. "I found something too. A key." My heart skipped. "What kind of key?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small brass key. It was taped to the back of a photo in Dad's drawer, with a note that said, "For Esther." I didn't know what it meant. Until now. He handed it to me. It was cold and tarnished, with a small tag attached. "Trunk, cellar." My stomach turned. That cellar. The one I hadn't stepped into since I was a child. It was where my mother kept old linens, broken toys, and secrets. I rose slowly, legs aching, and nodded toward the hallway. "Let's find out what he left me." The staircase down to the cellar groaned beneath our feet. The air grew damp and cold, like the memories that clung to the corners of my mind. David found the trunk first. An old weathered chest tucked beneath a moth-eaten tarp. The key slid in perfectly. Blick. Inside were stacks of notebooks, journals, letters, photographs, my brother's handwriting across every page. Apologies, memories, fragments of a guilty man's mind unraveling with age. Picked up one journal. The first line read, "I was 13 when I did something I never forgave myself for." My knees buckled, and I sat right there on the cellar floor. David knelt beside me, speechless. I read page after page. It was all there, his confession, his twisted justifications, his regrets, his belief that our mother made it worse by pretending it never happened. He said she threatened him too. That she told him if he ever admitted what he did, she'd call the police. Not on him but on me for seduction. My mother. My own mother. She hadn't just ignored what he did. She weaponized it to protect her golden boy. Even he admitted it in writing. "She told me to make it disappear," Jack wrote. "But it never did. Haunted me. It still does." I dropped the journal, my hands shaking. David looked pale. I didn't know," he stammered. "No one did," I murmured. "Because I followed the rules." Forget. But I wasn't going to forget anymore. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my mother's old rocking chair, reading every word. I wept for the little girl I used to be. For the woman I became. For the time I lost. For the pain I buried under decades of polite smiles. And when morning came, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep this a secret anymore. I didn't care if people believed me. I didn't care if it broke the family name. I would speak. Loudly. Clearly. Finally. But first I had to confront the person who taught me to lie. Because my mother was still alive. 98 years old. Living in a care home 3 towns over. And I was going to look her in the eyes. And ask her why. "If you're still here, your heart must be pounding like mine." Esther is about to do what she never dared. Confront the woman who erased her pain for decades. What will her mother say? And what other secrets are still buried in the shadows? Don't miss the next chapter. Like, comment if you believe Esther deserves peace. And subscribe to follow her powerful journey. The next morning I wore a plain blue dress. The same color I wore when I first left home at 18. As if some part of me believed that if I dressed like that brave girl again, I'd be able to do what she couldn't. David offered to drive me to the care home, but I said no. This was something I had to do alone. The drive to Willow Haven was long and silent. The road curved through old farmland, past silos and cornfields, past memories I'd kept locked away. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight. The letter, the journals, and the brass key were tucked into my bag like armor. I didn't know what I was going to say to her. I didn't know if I'd scream or cry or go silent. But I knew I had to see her face. One more time. Willow Haven smelled like lemon disinfectant and distant sadness. An orderly led me down a hallway where names hung on doors like quiet reminders of fading lives. Room 14B. I stood there for a long time before I knocked. "Come in," a thin voice called. She looked smaller than I remembered. My mother, Genevieve Collins, once a woman who could silence a room with a glance, now sat in a recliner. Her white hair curled around her temples like wisps of fog. She wore a beige cardigan, her legs covered with a wool blanket, a cup of lukewarm tea resting on her side table. She squinted at me. "Esther," she said slowly, her voice quivering with age but not with guilt. "My goodness, is that you?" I stepped inside, closed the door behind me. "I need to talk to you," I said. She blinked. "Well, sit down, dear. You look tired." "I'm not here for tea or pleasantries. I'm here for the truth." Her face stiffened. "Truth about what?" "You know exactly what." She looked down at her hands, wrinkled, trembling. "I found Jack's letters," I said, pulling them from my bag and laying them in her lap. "He confessed everything. What he did to me. What you told him. What you made me do." She didn't touch the pages. "I was just a child," I said, my voice shaking. "And instead of protecting me, you protected him. You told me to forget. You made me carry it alone." She finally looked up. I did what I had to do, she said flatly. Those 6 words hit me harder than any slap ever could. You did what you had to do, I whispered. She nodded. He was only a boy. Boys make mistakes. Families stay together. That wasn't a mistake. That was abuse. And I was 10. You silenced me to protect your reputation, not our family. She turned her face away, but not before I saw the flicker of something. Shame, maybe. Or was it pride? You always were dramatic, she muttered. Always needed attention. That old line. I felt it slice through me like broken glass. You watched me unravel for years, I said, tears brimming. And still you chose him. Because he was your brother. No, he was your favorite. And I was disposable. The room went quiet. The old clock ticked on the wall behind her. Outside, birds chirped in the courtyard like nothing had changed. But something had. I stood up. I needed you, I said. And you failed me. She didn't respond. Her eyes stared out the window, vacant. And I realized she wouldn't give me the apology I deserved. Because to her what she did wasn't wrong. It was necessary. I turned to leave. My hand on the doorknob. But then she spoke again. You were always stronger than him. That's why I chose you to carry the weight. Froze. I knew you'd survive, she said, her voice small now. Jack was weak. If I had blamed him, he would have crumbled. But you were made of something else. My breath caught. You didn't choose me because I was stronger. You chose me because I was quieter. She didn't argue. Left. Outside, I sat in the car for what felt like hours, staring at the dashboard, at my own reflection in the mirror, at the storm swelling behind my eyes. I had thought confronting her would bring closure, that I'd leave that place with peace. But I didn't feel peace. Felt rage, and grief, and something new, clarity. That day I made another decision. I was done carrying shame that didn't belong to me. I would no longer be the silent girl in the corner of the photo, smiling through clenched teeth. I was going to speak. I went home and opened my laptop, something I barely touched since my husband passed. And I began to write. My story. Every bit of it. Pain. The silence. The lies. The truth. I wrote for hours, days. It spilled out of me like floodwater. And then I hit publish. I posted it on a survivors forum, anonymously at first, then with my name. The next morning I woke up to 432 comments. Messages from women. Even teenagers. All of them saying the same thing. I thought I was alone. Some of them shared stories even worse than mine. Some had never told a soul. And just like that, my pain became purpose. But with that purpose came risk. 'Cause someone had seen my post. Someone who wasn't ready for the truth to come out. And the phone call I got that night changed everything. End of chapter 3. Esther finally broke her silence and exposed her truth. But not everyone is ready to face what really happened. Who called her, and what do they want? Will Esther's voice bring healing? Or new threats? Like, comment if you're standing with Esther. And subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter where secrets rise and consequences begin. The phone rang just past midnight. I had just drifted off in my recliner, the television humming softly in the background, when the shrill tone sliced through the silence. My heart jumped. At 81, every unexpected call after dark feels like bad news. I fumbled for the cordless. Hello. Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in decades. Sharp, aged, but unmistakable. You should have kept quiet, Esther. It was Eleanor, Jack's wife. My former sister-in-law. The woman who had once braided my hair and called me sweet girl, before marrying the man who destroyed me. I saw what you posted, she said coldly. What on earth do you think you're doing, airing our dirty laundry to strangers? My chest tightened. Our dirty laundry. Jack assaulted me, Eleanor. I've kept that pain buried my whole life. It's not just laundry, it's rot. You're too old to start drama, she hissed. Let the dead stay dead. You'll ruin everything for David. His job. His family. Think of him at least. I stood up furious. David deserves the truth. Not a fairy tale about some flawless father. Jack hurt me. And your silence helped cover it. There was a pause. I always knew, she admitted quietly. Not at first, but later. He told me things. In his sleep. In moments of guilt. I tried to pretend it didn't mean anything. But you were always different after that summer. My knees nearly buckled. You knew, I whispered. I had children to protect, Esther. I thought if I held it together they'd be safe. I was wrong. But that doesn't mean you get to destroy his memory now. I almost laughed. Destroy his memory. He destroyed me. She didn't answer. Hung up. My hands shook for hours. It was the second time in my life someone had asked me to stay silent for the sake of others. First my mother. Now Eleanor. But this time I refused. I called David the next morning. Told him everything Eleanor said. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'll handle her. You just keep telling the truth. That gave me strength. I went back online. I made another post. This time I didn't hold back. Added dates. Descriptions. My face. Name. I even scanned and shared a few lines from Jack's confession. Blurred out where needed to protect identities, but enough to show the world I wasn't imagining it. The comments exploded. Support. Outrage. Some hate. Some doubt. But mostly solidarity. I was asked to speak at a local survivors group. I wore my gray shawl, pinned my thinning hair, and stepped onto the stage with trembling knees but a steady voice. I was told to forget, I began. But my body remembered. My mind remembered. And now I will never forget again. The applause was thunderous. Not because I was brave but because I was no longer silent. That night something incredible happened. A young woman approached me after the talk. She was no older than 22. Her hands trembled as she reached into her purse and handed me a note. I've never told anyone, she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. Until I heard you speak. I opened the note later in the car. It was her story. Different names. Different house. Same silence. And I wept. Because for the first time in 70 years, I knew my pain wasn't wasted. But good things never come without a storm. 3 days later, someone vandalized my front porch. Red paint. Big letters. Liar. My heart sank. I sat on my steps staring at it. Not crying. Just teared. Called the police. Filed a report. But deep down I knew this was personal. Someone didn't want the truth spreading. And I had a very strong suspicion who it might be. The next morning my mailbox was smashed. Dead roses left on the ground. That was when I realized. Someone wanted to scare me into silence again. But they didn't know me anymore. I wasn't that 10-year-old girl hiding behind her mother's apron. I was a woman who had survived the unimaginable and still stood tall. Called the local news station. I shared my story again. Camera. My face. Name. My truth. And that night my phone rang again. But this time the voice on the other end said something that made my blood run cold. I know where you live, Esther. You should have stayed buried like the rest of them. Froze. This wasn't just about shame anymore. This was a threat. Esther has found her voice. But now she's being targeted. Who is behind the threats? Will she be forced back into silence? Or rise stronger than ever? Like, comment if you believe survivors deserve safety and truth. And subscribe to follow Esther's fight in the next chapter. The danger is growing, but so is her courage. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my kitchen window, the house cloaked in darkness, lights off so I could see outside. Every flicker of the street lamp made me jump. Every sound, the creak of floorboards, the whistle of wind, felt sinister. At 81, I'd seen many seasons, many storms. But this fear was something different. Someone wanted to scare me. And they were doing a damn good job of it. But fear is a funny thing. It doesn't just paralyze, it also reveals. It showed me that I was tired of running, tired of silence, tired of pretending I was fine when I wasn't. Picked up my phone. called David. He answered on the first ring. Aunt Esther. I told him everything. The vandalized porch, the smashed mailbox, the late-night phone call. He went silent. Then he said, "I'm coming over." Within 20 minutes, headlights spilled across my driveway. David stepped out of his truck, eyes sharp, fists clenched. For the first time I saw him not just as my nephew, but as a man ready to defend something he believed in. "Do you have any security cameras?" he asked. "No." "Well, you do now." He spent the next hour installing cameras around the porch and near the garage. Motion-activated lights. Even a doorbell cam. He moved like a man who had grown up watching people tiptoe around secrets and was now determined to shine light on them. While he worked, I made tea and stared at the red paint still staining my porch. Liar. But it didn't haunt me anymore. Because now I had evidence. Proof. Witnesses. And a voice louder than fear. David sat across from me at the kitchen table once the cameras were set up. He glanced at the letter I'd left sitting out again, the one Jack wrote before he died. "I still can't believe he admitted it," he said softly. "I can't believe Mom knew." "She didn't just know," I said. "She excused it." David rubbed his temples. "She always protected him. Even when I messed up as a teenager, she'd say, 'Jack never would have done that.' But now I wonder what else she let him get away with." I looked at him, then asked a question I hadn't dared say out loud before. "Do you think he hurt others?" David looked up, slowly, painfully. "I've wondered," he said. The silence between us was unbearable. If Jack had done it to me, what stopped him from doing it to someone else? And now, with my story public, someone out there was angry enough to threaten me. Maybe they were defending him. Or maybe they had secrets of their own to protect. David leaned in. "Let's take this to the police," he said. I hesitated. "And what if they say it's too late? That Jack's dead and gone, and nothing can be done?" "Then we go public again," he replied. Louder this time. That night we filed a police report. I handed them the phone call logs, the photos of the porch, the mailbox, the confession letter, the journals. The officer, a young woman with tired eyes, looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Most people don't speak up, especially not at your age. But you did. That matters." Gave me hope. For the first time in a long time I felt like the system might actually listen. But just when I thought things were settling, another bomb dropped. 3 days later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside. Single photo. It was me, sitting on my front porch the day after the red paint was cleaned off. Taken from across the street. From behind a car window. Someone had been watching me. I dropped the photo on the kitchen table, my breath caught in my throat. And beneath the photo, note: "If you don't stop, we'll stop you." My hands trembled. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was a warning. Called David again. He rushed over, furious. "Whoever this is, they're not going to get away with it," he said. "We're going to find out who's behind this." We reviewed the security footage from the night before. One figure appeared at 2:47 a.m. Hooded, lingering near my front yard, before slipping out of frame. Too blurry to identify. But it was something. The officer I'd filed the report with agreed to escalate the case. They promised to patrol the neighborhood more often. But still, every creak of the floor made my heart race. Every knock at the door sent chills down my spine. And then, the phone rang again. Block number. Picked it up. "Stop digging, Esther," the voice said. "You have no idea what Jack was involved in. Let the past die." Blick. I stood there frozen. Not because I was scared of what they might do to me, but because of what they said. You have no idea what Jack was involved in. This wasn't just about one act of abuse. This was bigger, deeper, more dangerous than I'd imagined. Jack had secrets, and I had just uncovered the surface. What if the people threatening me weren't just angry family? What if they were people Jack had been tied to? People he'd hurt, or helped? And what if Someone very close to me had been helping cover all of it up. Because as I reread the note, I realized something I hadn't seen before. The paper it was written on, it matched a notepad I recognized. A notepad from my mother's nursing home. Someone there had sent the warning. Jack's secrets are deeper than Esther ever imagined. And now the threats are closing in. Who is watching her? Who sent the warning from her own mother's care home? Don't miss the next chapter. Like, comment your theories below, and subscribe to follow this chilling journey to the truth. Esther's fight is far from over. The paper was pale yellow, lined with faint blue stripes, the kind you'd find on cheap memo pads passed around in nursing homes and hospitals. I knew it immediately. Willow Haven. I'd seen it when I signed in. When the nurses handed my mother her daily activity schedule. When she wrote down what she wanted for breakfast. And now, someone had used it to threaten me. I sat there in my living room, the photo and note trembling in my hands, my heart pounding in my ears. Who from that place would want to stop me? And more importantly, why? The obvious suspect flashed in my mind like a warning light. My mother, Genevieve Collins. Even at 98, she still held influence. Still had that icy way of looking right through you like you were made of glass. Could she have written the note? Slipped it to someone on staff? Was her loyalty to Jack so twisted that, even from a wheelchair, she'd try to protect his legacy? I couldn't wait another minute. I grabbed my keys. This time I didn't knock when I reached her room. I pushed the door open hard enough to rattle the hinges. She looked up, startled. She was alone, her knitting resting in her lap, an unfinished scarf dangling like a limp tongue. "What now?" she asked, as if I were nothing more than an annoying insect buzzing into her quiet afternoon. I dropped the photo and the note onto her lap. Her hands didn't move. "Recognize the paper," said voice sharp. She stared at it. "Emmy, you think I sent this?" she asked coldly. "You're the only one with reason to protect Jack this viciously." He picked up the photo, looked at it, looked through it. "No," she said slowly. "Not me. I wouldn't waste my time." "Then who would?" Snap. She shrugged, her voice disturbingly calm. Maybe someone who owed Jack something. Maybe someone he helped. Or someone who helped him. I narrowed my eyes. "Are you telling me there's more? That he did this to others?" She smiled. Not kindly. "You think Jack's guilt was just about you?" My stomach turned. I leaned in, my voice trembling. "Tell me everything." She didn't blink. "There was a boy," she said. "Your cousin. Richard." Froze. "Richard. My father's nephew. We played marbles together one summer before his family moved to Arizona. I was 11. He was 12. He disappeared from family gatherings after that year. I never knew why." "What about him?" "Yes." She sighed. "He told his parents that Jack did something. Your uncle got angry. Started sniffing around. Jack begged me to help. I told your uncle he was just lying. Trying to get attention. It worked." She said it like she was proud. "You ruined another child's life," I whispered. "I preserved a family," she replied. "Jack was going places. Richard was always troubled. People like you. You need to learn when to bury things." "No," I said, rising to my feet. "You need to learn that truth doesn't rot when buried. Grows mold. It infects everything." I shrugged. I left without another word. But as I walked out, I noticed something. A nurse was watching from down the hallway. Young. Pretty. Auburn hair. Name tag, Marla. She quickly turned away when our eyes met. Something about her struck me as familiar. I made a mental note. Come back later and talk to her. Alone. Back home, I sat with David and told him everything. About Richard. About the note. About the nurse who was eavesdropping. His face turned pale. "I know Marla," he said. "She used to date my friend in high school. She's not just a nurse. She used to babysit for Jack." The room tilted. "She what?" asked. "She watched me and my sister a few times when we were little. Jack paid her under the table. My head throbbed. Do you think? I don't know, David cut in. But if she's involved, we need to be careful. That night I didn't sleep again. Instead, I pulled out Jack's journals from the trunk. Most entries were about me. Some about nightmares. But one stood out. It was dated 1991. She said she'd never tell. But I saw it in her eyes. Marla's afraid. I told her it was just a misunderstanding. She was only 16. But if she talks, everything ends. I felt like the room went cold. Marla had known. For 30 years. And now, she was working at my mother's care home. I called the detective on my case the next morning. Explained everything. Jack's connection to Marla, the nurse watching me, the note, the journals. They agreed to start an investigation. Quietly. We'll pull her personnel file, the detective said. But if there's something there, it may take time. I didn't have time. I needed answers. So I went back to Willow Haven. Unannounced. This time I waited by the staff lounge. And when Marla came out, I stepped in front of her. We need to talk, I said. Her face drained of color. I'm on my break, she mumbled. Good, I said. Then sit. We walked to the courtyard, sat on a bench. She looked anywhere but at me. You know who I am, I said. Yes, she whispered. And you knew Jack, I continued. Tears welled up in her eyes. She nodded. He hurt me, I said. When I was 10. I know he hurt others. I think you're one of them. She broke. Right there on the bench. Years of silence shattered into sobs. I was 16, she cried. He said I was beautiful. He cornered me in the laundry room. Said no one would believe me. And when I tried to tell his wife, your sister-in-law, she called me a liar and fired me. My fists clenched. You sent the note, I said. Didn't you? She nodded slowly, shame in every inch of her body. I didn't want anyone to know, she whispered. Not again. I've built a life. Family. But when I saw you posting your story, panic. I thought if you kept going it would unravel everything. I'm not here to destroy your life, Marla, I said softly now. I just want the truth. And I want him exposed. Not just for me. For you. For everyone he hurt. She wept. I have proof, she said. An old letter. Kept it all these years. He mailed it to me after I left. I never opened it. I was too scared. I looked her dead in the eyes. Do you still have it? She nodded. Then she whispered. I'll bring it tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Because that night, Marla vanished. End of chapter 6. Marla held the next piece of the puzzle. But now she's disappeared. Was it fear? Or something more sinister? Comment your thoughts below. And subscribe to uncover what really happened in the next chapter. Esther's fight is entering dangerous territory. And someone is watching her every move. I knew something was wrong the moment the sun rose and my phone didn't ring. Marla had promised to meet me by 9, to hand me Jack's letter, the one she'd held onto for nearly 3 decades. I brewed coffee, laid out her favorite almond biscuits on a small plate like it was a peace offering, a symbol of trust between 2 women silenced by the same man. But 9 o'clock came, then 10. By noon I called her phone, straight to voicemail. By 2 I called Willow Haven. The receptionist sounded confused. She didn't show up for her shift this morning, she said. No call, no text. It's not like her. My stomach twisted. Called David. She's missing, I told him. Within the hour, David and I were at Marla's apartment. A small ground-floor unit on the quiet side of town. Her car was still in the parking lot, keys inside. The front door was locked. No signs of forced entry. The blinds were drawn. We knocked, shouted her name, tried the manager, then finally called the police. They arrived, pried the door open. The apartment was clean. Too clean. No dirty dishes. No clothes on the floor. No signs of a rushed exit. But on the kitchen counter, something waited for me. A white envelope. My name handwritten on the front, Esther. David opened it with gloved hands as the officers took photos. Inside was the letter, yellowed from time, unopened. Addressed to Marla Goodwin. Return address, J. Collins. I held the envelope with both hands, a strange mix of dread and clarity washing over me. David looked at me. You sure you want to read this now? He nodded. The envelope tore slowly. The letter inside was brief. 1 page. Written in Jack's unmistakable handwriting. Marla. I know what I did can't be undone. I see it in my son's eyes now, the same fear you once had. I won't make excuses, but I will say this. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one. There were others. People who knew. People who looked the other way. Some who even helped cover it up. It goes back further than you think. If anything happens to me, protect the journals. They'll come for you if they know you kept them. Sorry. My hands went cold. They'll come for you. That wasn't a confession, it was a warning. The officers took the letter into evidence. I gave them what I had. The previous note, the photo, Jack's journals. They promised to open an investigation into Marla's disappearance. But deep inside I already knew. She wasn't coming back. Maybe she ran. Maybe someone made her disappear. Either way, I was next. That night I couldn't sleep again. Paced the house. Triple locked the doors. Turned off the lights and sat near the window, just like before. But this time I was armed, with cameras, documents, and an unshakable resolve. At 3:17 a.m., my porch light flickered. The motion sensor camera clicked on. Figure moved across the screen. Not like last time, this one didn't creep or linger. They walked up to my door, placed something down, and left. I waited 5 minutes, heart pounding. Then I opened the door. Another envelope. No address. No note. Just one photo inside. It was Marla. Eyes closed. Face bruised. Lying on what looked like a motel room bed. Alive, or not. There was a message on the back. Back off, Esther. Or next time, it'll be someone else you care about. I dropped the photo. David. They were threatening David now. Called him immediately. Begged him to stay somewhere else. Anywhere. He refused. We're too close, he said. That letter proves your brother wasn't acting alone. That there's a network of silence. We've pulled back the curtain. Now we have to see it through. The next morning I made one more call. To a local journalist. Her name was Alyssa Grant, mid-30s, dogged, sharp-eyed. She'd been writing a series about historical abuse cover-ups in small towns. Priests, teachers, politicians. I told her everything. I met her at a diner and handed her copies of the journals, letters, and police reports. I told her about the threats, the photo of Marla, the phone calls. She sat there in stunned silence. This goes beyond your family, she finally said. This is systemic. Yes, I replied. And I won't let it die in the dark again. Alyssa promised to go public with the story. Within 24 hours, the headline broke online. Survivor speaks. 81-year-old woman exposes generational abuse and cover-up in quiet Indiana town. My photo was there. My voice. The letters. And then, the messages poured in. People sharing their stories. Former friends of Jack. Even someone who claimed to be Marla's cousin, said she hadn't come home, hadn't answered calls, and they were scared. The police now had pressure from the public. The story was picked up nationally. TV vans parked near my street. But all I could think about was the last thing Jack wrote. I wasn't the only one. And as I looked closer through one of the journals, I found something that made my blood run cold. List. Dozens of names. Initials mostly. But one name wasn't abbreviated. One name stood out in full. Genevieve Collins. My mother. Listed not as a bystander, but under a section titled, Indebted Participants. Esther's journey has uncovered something darker than she ever imagined. Her own mother's name on a list of participants. What does it mean? How deep does the rot go? Like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for the next chapter. The story is nearing its explosive truth, and Esther is ready to burn it all down. Don't miss it. I stared at the name for a long time. Genevieve Collins. My mother. Not listed under witnesses. Not even under silencers. But participants. I felt the air escape my lungs as I pressed my trembling fingers against the page. I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But Jack had written it himself, in that same tight, slanted handwriting he used in birthday cards and his school reports. This wasn't a mistake. It was a confession. I called David, my voice cracked and dry. I found something worse than we imagined. Within 30 minutes, he was at my kitchen table, pale as a ghost, reading the journal entry over my shoulder. Indebted participants. G. Collins. Protector, provider, gatekeeper. Without her, none of it would have stayed hidden. Promised me silence. Paid the girl off in 72. Said she understood. That she'd done the same once before. Said it was better to keep men's sins private. It kept the family name clean. I wanted to vomit. All these years, I had told myself my mother made a bad decision once. That she silenced me because she didn't know what else to do. That maybe deep down she loved me and just didn't know how to show it. But now I saw it clearly. She wasn't just complicit. She was active. This wasn't about keeping the family together. It was about control, power, image. And she didn't just betray me, she enabled Jack. Again and again. Got in my car. Drove straight to Willow Haven, heart racing, fists clenched. David wanted to come, but I told him I needed to do this alone. The nurses tried to stop me, but I pushed through. I opened the door to her room. She was sitting by the window, her eyes half closed, humming some forgotten hymn. Look at me, I said. She didn't move. I slammed the journal down on her lap. She opened her eyes and saw the truth staring back at her. I read it, I said. Every word. You didn't just protect Jack. You covered for him. You paid girls off. You orchestrated the silence. She sighed like I was a child whining about a broken toy. Don't be dramatic, she said. You don't understand the world I lived in. Women weren't supposed to make noise. We cleaned up messes. That's what I did. No, I said, voice shaking. You created messes. You let Jack keep hurting people. And now one of them is missing because of it. She raised an eyebrow. Marla. Yes, I spat. And if she's dead, that's on you too. She looked away. You should be thanking me. You became strong. You wouldn't be this loud, this bold, without what happened. My whole body turned cold. I'm not strong because of what happened, I said. I'm strong in spite of it. She shook her head. You're going to destroy your whole family over something that happened 70 years ago. I leaned in, my voice low and sharp. I already had my family destroyed. You just called it normal. But it wasn't. I turned and walked out. And I didn't look back. The next morning, the story hit national television. NBC. CNN. Even late-night shows picked it up. 81-year-old woman exposes multi-decade abuse cover-up in Indiana family. Genevieve Collins's name was included. And so was Jack's. And Marla's disappearance. And then, more names started coming in. People from the church. A retired judge. A local school superintendent who'd retired early after complaints. They were all listed in Jack's journals. And suddenly my truth had cracked open a dam. The police held a press conference. Said they were pursuing new leads in a possible trafficking network that spanned back to the late 1960s. Said they'd identified patterns of cover-ups, silence, and threats. A network. Not just a family secret. A decades-long conspiracy that used silence like currency. I sat on my porch that night, wrapped in my shawl, staring at the stars. My heart ached for Marla. For Richard. For the nameless others. But I also felt something else. Freedom. Then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Answered. Esther. A man's voice said, deep and unsteady. My name is Calvin. I think Jack hurt my sister. In 1985. She was just 13. She passed away 5 years ago. She never said much, but I read your story. And the way she talked about him. I know. Tears filled my eyes. I'm so sorry, I said. He exhaled. Thank you for speaking. You gave her voice. Even if it came too late. Hung up. Sat in silence. Then another call. Another story. Another cry. They kept coming. One by one. Like flickers of light in a long, dark tunnel. David came over the next day and found me staring at the names in Jack's journal. I think this was his way of confessing, he said. A coward's confession. But still a map. He nodded. Then we follow the map, I said. Until every shadow is exposed. And so we did. With Alyssa's help, we published the names. We shared the pages. We protected identities where needed. But we didn't flinch. We made noise. And 2 days later, something happened that none of us expected. The police called. They'd found Marla. Alive. Drugged. Disoriented. Locked in a storage unit 50 miles outside of town. Someone had dumped her there with just a mattress and a space heater. But she was breathing. Barely. I visited her in the hospital. She held my hand, her voice a whisper. They tried to shut me up, but you kept going. Tears rolled down my cheeks. So will you. And I meant it. Because now we weren't just surviving. We were reclaiming. That night my doorbell rang again. Opened it. Package lay at my feet. Inside. A burnt page from one of Jack's journals. Only one word was still legible across the scorched paper. Mother. The network is unraveling. Esther has exposed a decades-long conspiracy. But someone is still trying to destroy the final piece of the puzzle. Why was that journal page burned? What is the last secret Genevieve is hiding? Don't miss the next chapter. Like, comment your thoughts and subscribe, because the truth isn't done speaking. And neither is Esther. The charred page sat in my lap like a smoldering ghost. The single word still visible. Mother. Burned hotter than the edges ever could. Someone had gone out of their way to destroy that page. To make sure no one saw what Jack wrote. But why? And what had Jack written about Genevieve that someone was so desperate to erase? I ran my fingers across the ashes, willing the words to return. But they were gone, scorched to nothing by hands that still worked in the dark. David sat across from me, his jaw tight. He'd seen enough secrets for a lifetime, but this one hit him harder. She knew, he said quietly. She didn't just cover it up. She was part of it. She had to be. I think there's more, I whispered. Something no one wants out. Jack knew it. That's why someone burned the proof. We both looked at the surviving journals. There were gaps, days, weeks, sometimes months of silence in the middle of a man unraveling. And we never questioned it. Till now. What if there were more pages? David asked. I stood slowly, a thought forming. Terrifying one. We only found what Jack left in the trunk. What if he left more somewhere else? David's eyes widened. His office. It was still standing, locked up tight behind a family storage unit downtown. Eleanor, Jack's widow, had kept the lease after his death, refusing to let anyone touch his things. She told everyone it was filled with tax files and old furniture. But I'd seen the key once, hanging around her neck like a charm. And now I needed it. We drove to Eleanor's that night. She didn't answer the door right away. When she finally opened it, her eyes darted between me and David. I have nothing else to say to either of you, she said sharply. I'm not here for conversation, I replied. I'm here for the key. She flinched. The office, she asked. You think there's something in there? I know there is, I said. And the police are already involved. So unless you want to be charged with obstruction, hand it over. David stepped forward. We're not playing anymore, Eleanor. Her shoulders sagged. Age had crept into her posture. Her fear showed. But she disappeared for a moment, then returned with a small brass key. She placed it in my palm like it burned her. Whatever you find, she said softly. I didn't know. I didn't believe her. We went straight to the storage unit. The air inside smelled like dust, old leather, and secrets. Filing cabinets lined the back wall. A bookshelf sagged under the weight of photo albums, trophies, and plaques Jack had collected. But in the far corner, a large wooden desk sat covered in a tarp. We peeled it back. There it was. Another journal. Older. Leather-bound. Thicker than the others. The first page had Jack's name. And a date. 1951. The year before he hurt me. We opened it. Inside were entries so disturbing I could barely breathe. He wrote about urges. Confusion. Shame. But then a shift. An entry that chilled me to the bone. Mother said it was okay. That it's in our blood. That her uncle did it to her and she turned out fine. She said the key to survival is silence. I dropped the book. David's face turned white. She taught him, I whispered. She normalized it. Passed it down like a sickness. I flipped more pages. She showed me how to make them quiet. She said girls are made to bend. That they break, but they heal. Tears blurred my vision. My mother hadn't just protected Jack. She had created him. She had passed down trauma like a family recipe, and when it came to me, her only daughter, she had let history repeat without a second thought. David wrapped an arm around me, but I barely felt it. I was shaking, but not from grief, from fury. The final entry in that journal, dated just months before Jack's death, sealed everything. She still writes to me, even now, says I did what I had to do, that Esther needs to let it go, that the world won't understand people like us. She said to burn the letter, but I couldn't. I think part of me wanted her exposed. My mother had written to Jack. After everything. Even after I'd left. Even after decades of silence. She hadn't changed. She had encouraged him. And when he finally cracked under the weight of his guilt, she blamed me. We called the detective that night. Turned over the journal. The case exploded. The FBI joined in. What had started as a family secret was now a federal investigation into generational abuse, cover-up, and institutional failure. Survivors came forward. 2 from Jack's old high school. 1 from a summer church camp in the 70s. One woman claimed she'd gone to Genevieve after Jack assaulted her, and my mother had offered her money to disappear. The town's mayor resigned. The church board disbanded. A retired judge, Genevieve's cousin, was arrested for tampering with a child abuse report from 1974. And then, quietly, the final blow came. Genevieve Collins was taken into custody. At 98 years old in a wheelchair, she was arrested for obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and conspiracy to conceal child sexual abuse. The media swarmed. But she didn't say a word. Not even to me. The last time I saw her, she was being wheeled into a police van. Head held high, lips pursed like she still thought herself above the truth. But she wasn't. She was beneath it. Buried in lies she'd planted, watered, and watched grow into monsters. I sat on my porch that night and finally felt the wind in my lungs again. For the first time in 70 years I wasn't afraid. Not of the past. Not of the truth. Not even of what came next. But then, another letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. You may have won the battle, Esther. But you've only scratched the surface. There are others. Higher up. And they're watching. Stay quiet. Or we'll finish what Jack started. Esther has pulled back the veil and burned down decades of silence. But someone else is still out there. More powerful and more dangerous than she imagined. Who are they? What are they protecting? Like, comment your support for Esther and subscribe. I held the letter in my hand for over an hour. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. There are others. Higher up. And they're watching. This wasn't just some faceless warning. This was a promise. Threat. A signal that I had poked the wrong bear. That I had climbed too high up a tree where the view was dangerous, and the branches were about to be cut beneath me. But I was no longer afraid of falling. I had already survived the worst kind of silence. The kind that eats at your soul while everyone else calls you strong. The kind that forces a child to lie for the sake of family. And now, at 81 years old, I was no longer protecting anyone but the truth. I called Alyssa the journalist. "This goes deeper," I said. Her voice cracked with urgency. "I believe you. My editor just got an anonymous email. No signature, just a single document. It lists donors, politicians, former judges. Connected to Jack. Connected to your mother." I swallowed hard. "They're not just warning me, Alyssa. They're threatening to finish what Jack started." "I'm sending you the file," she said. "But Esther, you need protection." David installed a second set of cameras, floodlights, and even offered to stay with me. But I declined. "If they're watching," I said, "let them see me. I have nothing left to hide." That night, I opened the email Alyssa sent. There it was. A spreadsheet of names, some real, some coded. Linked to donations, hush funds, payoffs. The trail went all the way back to 1960. Hospitals, private schools, churches. And in the center, G. Collins. Genevieve's name popped up over 50 times. Payments made to silence girls. Trips paid for men Jack met through the church board. A wire transfer to Arizona in 1963. Matching the timeline when my cousin Richard disappeared from family events. And beneath one column labeled, "Emergency Expense, 1952, was a chilling line. $400 to Esther C. Incident resolved by mother. I fell to my knees. I had always wondered why my mother suddenly bought me that bicycle. Why she smiled when I said thank you, even though I didn't want it. I thought it was guilt. An apology she didn't know how to say. But it was worse. It was hush money. She'd paid herself on my behalf. They kept records of my abuse like it was an expense line. Like I was a bill to be written off. I printed the spreadsheet, highlighted names, marked timelines, and I made my decision. We were going to court. The next week, with the help of a civil rights attorney, we filed a multi-party lawsuit against Willow Haven, the church diocese, and the Collins Family Trust, founded by Genevieve in the 1980s. I became the lead plaintiff. The media had a frenzy. But more importantly, survivors joined me. Marla. 2 other women from Jack's youth group. Even Richard, my cousin, now a quiet man in his 70s, flew in from Arizona to testify. "I thought I was the only one," he told me with tears in his eyes. "I thought no one would believe me." I hugged him tighter than I ever had anyone. We were not alone anymore. The courtroom was packed. Cameras outside. Sketch artists in the front row. Genevieve was wheeled in. But cold as ever. She refused to speak. Refused to testify. But the documents spoke for her. Every hush payment. Every forged signature. Every calculated silence. When the judge read the verdict weeks later, I stood holding David's hand. Guilty of negligence, obstruction, and conspiracy. Millions in damages were awarded to the victims. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that the world finally heard our voices. That I had finally heard my own. After court, a young woman no older than 20 came up to me in the hallway. Her eyes were red. Her voice trembling. "I told my mom what happened to me last night. Because of you." Hugged her. Didn't say a word. Just let her sob into my shoulder. 'Cause sometimes healing starts with being seen. 2 months passed. The town changed. Willow Haven's board was replaced. The Collins name was stripped from every building my mother once paid to beautify. And Jack. He was remembered not as a golden boy, but as a cautionary tale. Still, there was one more moment waiting for me. The final piece. I stood alone at my mother's grave. The grass hadn't fully settled. She'd passed quietly in custody just 3 weeks after the trial ended. I placed a single note on her tombstone. It read, "You once told me girls are made to bend." But I didn't break. I straightened. You spoke. And I finally let go. I turned and walked away. No tears. No words. Just peace. I'm not telling you this story for pity. I'm telling it because there's someone out there, maybe you, Who's holding on to silence that isn't yours to carry anymore? Let it go. V. And if you can't yet know this, there's no expiration date on your truth. If an 81-year-old woman could tear down generations of lies, so can you. If Esther's story moved you, if her strength reminded you that healing is possible, even after decades of silence, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And remember, silence may protect the powerful, but truth, it frees the broken.